Well, let me ask you a question. If facts decide political arguments, why do intelligent people look at the same facts and come to completely different conclusions? Why do two voters hear the same evidence, see the same statistics, and still disagree? If politics were really about information, the candidate with the strongest facts would always win. But that's clearly not what happens. Perhaps because the argument doesn't start with the facts. Perhaps it starts much earlier, with a picture. A picture in our heads. Because before people evaluate an issue, they often decide how they see it. And that picture can shape everything that follows. So today, we're going to explore one of the most powerful and overlooked forces in political communication: visual metaphors. Why they matter, why the best political communicators use them instinctively, and why whoever controls the picture in people's heads often controls the conversation that follows. Hi, I'm David O'Brien, and welcome to another episode of the Face Forward podcast, the podcast where we explore how candidates become the face of the change voters are already seeking, and how to do it deliberately. Joining me as always is Face Forward co-founder Vaughan Emsley. Hey, Vaughan.
Hello, David.
So, Vaughan, are visual metaphors simply a clever communications technique?
I think they're much more important than that, and I would argue that visual metaphors are so powerful that they often determine the outcome of an argument before the argument even begins.
Well, that's a pretty big claim, Vaughan.
Well, think about what happens when we describe immigration as a flood, or when we describe government as being like a swamp, or taxes as a burden. No one's made an argument yet. Nobody has presented any evidence, yet people are already reaching conclusions based on the power of those visual metaphors. So metaphors don't just explain an issue, they define the way people think about it.
Can you give us some examples of that?
Well, one of the most famous, and in fact we talked about this in the Franklin Delano Roosevelt podcast, is before America entered the Second World War, there was considerable resistance to helping Britain. People didn't want America to get dragged into that war. But the British needed help, and Roosevelt wanted to lend the British American resources. Now, he could have talked about geopolitics and trade routes or military alliances or strategic interests. Instead of that, on his radio broadcast, he said, if your neighbor's house is on fire, you lend him your garden hose.
Great metaphor.
Exactly. And suddenly a complex foreign policy issue becomes something every homeowner understood, and it became something moral. The facts hadn't changed, but the picture had changed. And when the picture changes, people's understanding changes with it. Reagan was brilliant at this. He didn't describe America as a collection of economic indicators. He gave voters a picture, if you remember, the shining city on the hill.
Right.
A place where people wanted to move towards, aspiration and possibility. And Margaret Thatcher, this is another brilliant one, repeatedly compared government finances to a household budget. You can't spend more than you've got coming in. People could understand it, they could picture it, and because they could picture it, they could discuss it.
Right.
And we've seen recently build the wall, drain the swamp. Whether you agreed with those ideas or not is largely irrelevant. People understood them. They could picture them. Just one image, many meanings. And that's the hallmark of a powerful metaphor.
Yeah, it's really true. So visual metaphors don't simply explain issues. They organize them in a sense.
Yeah, they define reality. And let's come back to the immigration question, because we talked about immigration as a flood earlier. So if you describe it as a flood, what questions do people ask? They say, well, how do we stop it? How do we contain it? How do we turn it back? How do we protect ourselves? That's how you would describe it if the debate was about a flood.
Right.
Now, let's turn it on its head. Let's say it's about builders, about entrepreneurs, about new neighbors arriving in a community. Suddenly, the questions change. The images change, the questions change, and the questions are, how do we integrate them? How do we benefit them? How do we grow together? The immigrants haven't changed, the facts haven't changed, the issue hasn't changed, only the picture has changed. But the conclusions people reach change dramatically, and that's because the metaphor creates the frame. and this is important, whoever creates the frame usually has the advantage. One of the biggest mistakes in politics is arguing inside somebody else's metaphor against the case
become
that they're making.
defensive.
You've already accepted the picture, their picture. You're fighting on their ground. So the smart thing is to create a different picture altogether.
So that begs the question, what's happening inside our heads?
Well, it's a wiring question, but think about how most of us learnt to read. The first books we encountered weren't a wall of text. They were full of pictures.
I still read books like that, though, Vaughan.
Like Janet and John. See Janet run, see John sit, see Spot.
Oh, that's the
right?
English version of Spot.
And so you see the pictures and then the words, you make sense of the words through the pictures, right? Not the other way around. So human beings are highly visual. Our visual system evolved long before written language. Images are processed much faster than text. It's less effort. And importantly, they also connect directly to memory and experience, which brings us back to another thing we've talked about and we've mentioned frequently, is pattern recognition. Visual metaphors work because they align with the way human beings naturally process information.
But if they're so effective, why don't we see more of them?
That is the million-dollar question, because modern politics has become obsessed with information, more policies, more talking points,
Right.
more arguments, more issue papers, less storytelling. People are overwhelmed with this, and politicians and political commentators often behave as though voters are carefully evaluating competing arguments. Most voters don't. They're desperate for shortcuts, and visual metaphors are amongst the most powerful shortcuts you can use.
Yeah, they forget about brevity. And this brings us back to Face Forward.
It does. At Face Forward, we often say that the candidate has to become the face of change that voters are seeking. But before people can believe in that change, they have to be able to see it. They're not looking for policy papers. They're not looking for spreadsheets. They're looking to move towards a picture. So pictures are aspirational in their head. Is it a safer neighborhood? Is it a stronger economy? Is it a country getting back on track? Is it a state where their children can stay, prosper, and build a future? That's what people can understand. Visual metaphors matter because they make change visible. They take something abstract and make it concrete. They give people a picture of where they are and a picture of where they could go. That is why the battle for political meaning is, as we said at the beginning, often won before the facts are discussed, because whoever controls the picture in people's heads usually controls the conversation that follows.
So I guess perhaps the real question isn't, how do I explain this, but what picture does my idea create?
Yes, because if you can see it, you can understand it. If you can understand it, you can remember it. And if you remember it, in the world of viral communication, you can repeat it. And that's how ideas spread,
Right.
not as information, but as pictures in people's heads.
Well, very interesting. Thank you, Vaughan.
Thank you, David.
Well, one more thing. Before we go, we'd like to share some very exciting news here at Face Forward. We now have a new online home at faceforwardglobal.com. And there you'll find our growing library of podcasts, articles, and insights into political storytelling, along with more about our approach to helping candidates become the face of the change voters are already seeking. We're also pleased to announce that Face Forward is now working with campaigns, organizations, and consulting partners across both the United States and the United Kingdom. So, wherever you're campaigning, we'd love to continue the conversation. So visit us at faceforwardglobal.com. And thanks for joining us for another episode of the Face Forward podcast. Face Forward, where candidates become the face of the change voters are already seeking, and how to do it deliberately. Until next time, this is David O'Brien, and thank you for listening. So long.